Hey, what's going on, guys? Just want to do another video about pre-production, and basically instead of talking about the musician's responsibilities and roles from a technical standpoint, we're going to look at it from the opposite side and talk about the engineer's responsibilities and things like that. So it's really important for the engineer in the studio to make sure that everything is working well and appropriately, there aren't any issues, and the main reasons is really we want to make sure the session goes smooth. We also want to make sure that the artist and band's time is used efficiently. Plus, we want to make sure that they get the most out of their money as well, since they're paying for it. So it's important that the engineer has the studio ready to go, everything's in good shape, and there aren't any issues from a technical standpoint. That way, we can do what we're here to do and make the best music we can with the time that we have, and we're not troubleshooting stuff. So a few things that jump out to me as an engineer would be, number one would probably just be patching stuff, like patching cables to preamps, headphone mixes, things like that. That's probably the number one thing, is just routing and getting and understanding the signal flow and making sure all that stuff is connected properly. So in other words, you know, if let's say we're in a room, the tracking room, and we plug into input 1, we need to make sure that input 1 is working. You know, that needs to, like, we don't want to have a bad cable from the panel to the other panel in the control room. We need to know those things if they're not working. We need to know if it doesn't pass phantom power and things like that. You know, what type of microphone are we using? Are we using a condenser micro that even needs phantom power? Maybe it doesn't. But all those things are something that the engineer really should have down and know. That way they can patch things correctly and quickly without having any issues. So that's kind of the number one thing, is just that. Just making sure that patching microphones, DIs, instruments, things like that into the correct preamps, and making sure that everything's actually routed correctly. If so, then everything should sound pretty good and work really nicely. So that's probably number one. The next thing I'd probably say is getting headphone mixes right for the musician. So that's something that I think a lot of studios and engineers kind of, I don't want to say they do it poorly, but it's a little bit of an afterthought sometimes, because we're concerned with microphone preamps, mics, interfaces, the DAW that we're using, room acoustics, treatment, things like that. So we're concerned with a lot of other things, and we want to make sure we get the best sounds that we can get. However, how the musicians hear things, it's sometimes a little bit of an afterthought, because that's not what we're hearing. We're hearing things straight from the control room, straight from the speakers, you know, so it's not necessarily something that we always think about as much as we should. But it's crucial that this works well and sounds good, because if a musician hears himself and it sounds good to them, it inspires them. They play better, and you get better performances as the producer and engineer too. And then there's less editing, there's less comping, all of that. So the headphone mixes are extremely important, and making sure that you can get the musicians what they need in their ears and making sure that sounds good is critical for a great session. Everyone will be happy and excited and enjoying what they're doing. And I've been on both sides of this, where the headphone mixes were not good, and it's like, man, this is really hard to play, and it's like I'm questioning, is this what my instrument sounds like? I'm a bass player first, so playing bass, I was just remembering, like, man, is this really what it sounds like? You know, and it makes me kind of play differently. I've also been on the other side of it, where it's like, wow, this sounds really good to me, and then I'm just playing. I'm not thinking about the headphone mixes. I'm not distracted by any of that stuff. So it is really important that that stuff is done well. And that would definitely be something that I would consider and look at as a musician in a band. I'd be like, what is the headphone system like? What do I have? Are you making my mixes? Am I creating my own mixes? Those type of things. And some places do have surfaces and things like that where you can create your own mixes, which, you know, can be great as well, especially if you have the experience doing that. It can actually be a little overbearing, a little bit too much if you haven't done that, because it's kind of hard to actually do that well, especially if you've never done it. So those are kind of two of the things that jump out to me right away, where it's like, what slows down a session most often. And it's usually headphone mixes not being great and just bad patching, you know, stuff not working, or you're like, oh, I'm not getting any signal from this. Really, if you're the engineer or the producer or the studio owner or all of the above, it's really important that you know the whole system kind of inside and out. That way you can troubleshoot things really quickly and immediately when they do happen, and you're not stressed out, you're not flustered, you're not, whoa, what's going on? I don't know how to do that. That stuff can leak out to everybody who's there, and if you just handle that stuff calmly, you're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. Let me do that, boom, boom, cleaned up. It could just be a digital thing that you just a couple clicks and it's done, and you've solved it. And that's pretty important, actually, just being able to know how to solve these different technical issues that can come up. So yeah, and so another point that I'd like to bring up would be just generally being prepared for the session. And this kind of comes back to the communication you've had with the band and the artist and stuff like that, and how you're going about the session. But just knowing what all your inputs are, like how many mics are you using on a drum kit, what are you doing for electric guitars or the amps, what are you doing for bass, vocals, all those things. Like, are you doing all that stuff at the same time? Once you've kind of figured out that plan though, then it's time to figure out the technical. All right, what channels are we running for each thing? What microphones are we using? Which preamps are these actually all going into? Things like that. And you can kind of do all that stuff ahead of time if you want. And if you do that, then you're a little bit more ahead of the game and more prepared for the session when it's time to get the band in here and stuff like that. So that includes, setting up microphones, patching them, testing them out, and also setting up your Pro Tools session if that's the DAW you use, and just making sure that all that stuff is coming through correctly and the way you want it to come through and stuff like that. So if you take time to do all that, that'll definitely save you a bunch of time and be ready to go for the session, and just record and track and do all the things that you need to do. And then what I'll add to that is, as the engineer running the Pro Tools session, it's really important that you are very familiar with that DAW or whatever you use. That way you can move quickly and efficiently, and you're not slow or stumbling down or slowing down any of the process. I mean, that's a big part of what artists and bands and musicians kind of see, is like how fast you are and accurate and good you are at running that software. Because when you can do it pretty quickly and how to, oh, you need our take, boom, next take for everything. Okay, cool. Oh, we need to punch in right here. Okay, let's punch in right here. Hey, the click's too loud for me. Okay, let me turn that down for you. All those different things are engineering skills that you do through your DAW. And if you can do all that stuff pretty well and quickly, you're going to build a lot of confidence and trust with the artist and band, which ultimately is going to be good for building that relationship, and even for them if they want to come back and things like that. But if they get the impression that you kind of know what you're doing, that you're not quite there, they're not going to feel as confident, or may be looking for somebody new next time. So it's important that you know your craft, your skill, your software, all that stuff very well, so you can build, not only do you want great sessions, but you want to build a great relationship with these people as well. And that's something that, as the artist and musician, it's important to see those things as well, and be like, is this something, do I want to come back here the next time I do something? So that's really important for you to pay attention to those things as well from that perspective. So anyways, I think that wraps up about most of the things I can think of from the engineering side for technical things and things like that you want to be prepared for and ready to go. So I hope that helps you guys, and I'll talk to you guys later.